Okay, so tell me if I'm too loud. How's that? Is that okay? Okay, so here I am. My name's Lauri, and I'm an alcoholic. And, my goodness, by the grace of God and the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, I haven't had to have a drink since October 11th, 1996. And for that, I am very grateful. I have a home group, and that home group meets 7 days a week. It's in Park City. We meet Monday through Friday at 7 a.m. and Saturday, 8 a.m. and Sunday. And it's at the Senior Center on Woodside, right behind the fire station. So if you're coming skiing this winter, come and see us before you go skiing. I'm there all the time. I mean, if I'm not out of town, that's where I am. And that keeps me grounded in Alcoholics Anonymous. I have a sponsor. Her name is Polly P. And she has a sponsor. So those are the things I need to stay sober in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. And let's see, where do I start? First, I want to thank John for inviting me here tonight, and also for taking me to dinner. Like, you guys take your speakers to dinner. That was the nicest thing. I mean, I never have been taken to dinner before I speak. And I like to do this once a year. I'll tell my story in Park City once a year. And I haven't done this in Salt Lake in a while, so I'm glad to get the opportunity. I am honored to tell my story here tonight. And Alcoholics Anonymous, wow. You know, I'll have to tell you that looking back, I could say that it was a great moment, that it was one of those great moments. It was probably the greatest moment in my life, that moment when I surrendered from this, like, horrible, disgusting, horrifying, like, belittling. I mean, I could go on and on and on, but that moment that I surrendered from this disease and said, I can't do this anymore. Like, really, for me, it just got to the place where I knew I was going to die. You know, if it wasn't going to be an overdose of some sort or a car accident, it was going to be by my own hand, for sure. And that was where alcohol and drugs had taken me. Drugs are a big part of my story, but because this is Alcoholics Anonymous, and I respect Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm not going to talk about my drug use in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, but I like to mention it because it is a big part of my story. And so anyways, I don't know, like, where do I start? I don't know, like, where I was born? I don't know. You know, I mean, obviously, I should let you know that. But I don't know. My sponsor had me get this CD of a speaker in Alcoholics Anonymous, and his name's Clancy I, and he's out of Los Angeles, right? I mean, I'm sure there's some people in here that know of him. And, you know, and it was the alcoholism, the disease of perception. And, you know, right when I got her as a sponsor, she said, I want you to do this. And I listened to it. And, I mean, it was just a great CD. And I just, you know, love what the man has to share. But he talked about me, really, as an alcoholic. And he talked about the perception of this disease and I can't see the reality. I can't see the truth of my own life, you know. And I'm just so grateful to the women in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous that were honest enough with me to tell me the truth about my life, even when I didn't want to hear it, you know. And I think because of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, good sponsorship along the way, the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, and a loving God, and the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, on most days today, I can see the truth about my life. But I have to tell you that I'm a girl that needs a lot of meetings. I mean, every day I'm at a meeting. And I just celebrated 13 years. And I don't say that to, like, brag and say, oh, look at me, I'm standing up here with it. No. I mean, it was really hard. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, was get sober and stay sober, you know, to stay stopped, right? But even in the beginning, I mean, I would run to meetings because that was the only time in my day that I actually felt like I could breathe, you know. Like all I needed to do was get around you people and I could be okay for that moment. And you know, although life has gotten a lot easier, like I'm not running to Alcoholics Anonymous every day. You know, there's a lot of days I am, but I mean, not every day. It's just one of those things that I need a lot of meetings, and I've never not done a lot of meetings. Like, I've never taken a break from Alcoholics Anonymous. And for that, I'm really grateful, because I think if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'm going to keep getting what I'm getting, you know. Okay, so born and raised. I know, and I'll make this quick. Like the drunkalogue, for sure. I will. Yeah, I'm not going to stay there for too long. But I grew up back east. I grew up in a town just about 45 minutes outside of New York City in Connecticut, right? And I am living proof that you don't have to come from the disease of alcoholism to be an alcoholic. My mom and dad weren't alcoholics. My mom and dad never drank. Like, they didn't even not drink because it was a problem. They didn't drink because they didn't like it. Like, I can't even, where the hell did I come from? Right? I mean, it doesn't even make sense. And I have an older sister, and she was one of those that was like, you know, one glass of wine and, oh, I'm starting to feel it kind of a gal. You know, let me push that, you know. Like, that makes no sense to me. And then there's me, you know. So I didn't come from the disease of alcoholism. And but I am of the belief system that if you shake a family tree, one's going to fall out somewhere, you know. So there was, believe me, one in the bunch, I'm sure, somewhere. And, you know, and so, but, you know, I mean, don't get me wrong, because it doesn't, just because I didn't grow up in a household full of alcoholism, it doesn't mean that it was perfect, right? There were things going on, for sure, you know. And my mom was the rager, you know, I mean, completely out of her mind, really. Bless her sweetheart. I mean, I love her, but completely, you know. And you know, as her disease progressed, you know, it got to a place really where, I mean, you just didn't know. You didn't know. Like, when you were walking in that house, you had no idea, you know, what was going to come flying across the door, you know. And I think the only difference between me and my mom is she forgot to drink. I am not kidding you, you know. I mean, it might have been better off for her if she did drink, but, you know, it was pretty bad. And as her disease progressed, she, you know, she just, you know, really was probably only happy when we were on vacation. And that was pretty iffy, because if the weather wasn't right, if it was too windy or it wasn't sunny or it wasn't perfect, Mom wasn't happy, you know, and it was kind of sad. But, you know, so that was the household I grew up in. And, you know, I come from two, you know, working class people. I mean, Mom and Dad, we were very middle class, straight across the board. And my dad was very quiet. You know, my dad was just the quiet one, and you know, I used to judge him a lot. You know, like, why would he let Mom talk to him like that? You know, what? Like, I don't know. Anyways, I judged him a lot, and you know, I don't know. As I've hung around Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm really grateful that I can understand today. And my mom found Al-Anon when I found Alcoholics Anonymous. So what a blessing that was. And that was in '96, and so she's and a very active member in Al-Anon. So I just plug for that beautiful fellowship. She's absolutely a woman that I admire today, and she's an amazing person, and one I aspire to be. Really, she's just got an unbelievable life. And my dad passed in June. So, you know, I'm just so grateful for Alcoholics Anonymous, because it's given me a way to look at things in my life. Because my dad, I mean, just an amazing man. I mean, he was an educator in the town that I grew up in for 35 years. And very well respected in the community. And just one of those kind of really a man of few words, not even, just kind of like one of those, not even a hurried man. Like he moved slowly, and, he was one of those guys that could get up in the morning and just be like, just such, like I have to work so hard just to be what my dad was when he got out of bed, just a nice person, right? And so, just a really great guy. And so, a life well lived for sure. And, so I don't know. Can I fault him for just loving my mom so much? He just adored her. And, I just can't fault him for that. And so I learned how not to judge him in Alcoholics Anonymous, right? So it's pretty cool. And, me and my dad were, when he passed, he was really ill for the last years of his life, but we were good, Like he got to see me sober, and what a gift, I got to have like a life with my family sober. But anyways, okay, so I grow up back east, and I grow up in this family that was, to me, very boring. Completely boring, they just did, I don't know, there was no music playing in the house. It was just so, I wanted to belong to the house down the street where, her mom was divorced and she was really pretty and dated football players and drove a Corvette and smoked weed with her daughter, Now that was my kind of a house, The one I got put in was not my kind of a house. They were very boring. And so I swore not to be like my family. I really did not want to be like my family at all. And, well, it turned out I was just not like my family. I definitely, knew how to have a good time. And so, but it was, I was one of those people. So I was like depressed. I had a very sad story. And I was so like miserable. This is before I picked up my first drink. I was so miserable, I did not want you to be happy. So I wanted you to be miserable too. So if you're hanging with me, I'm going to make you miserable, And that was my life. It really was pretty much, it was sad. I'm just going to say that, But it wasn't like I come from an unloved family or anything. My parents loved me so much. They said they loved me. I love you, I love you, I love you, all the time. Okay, crazy all the time. And I got to Alcoholics Anonymous telling you I was never loved. Never ever. It's a spiritual illness that can only be solved with a spiritual solution. You can't love me enough. You can't do enough for me. You can't buy enough for me. There's nothing that's going to fill this hole in my soul, right? And until I found alcohol. At 12. That's the magic number. I'd like to get a raise of hands, but no, really not. But how many people start, I hear so many people from the podium say, I started drinking at 12, and that was my story. 12 years old, I took my first drink, and that was it. I just was like, looking back now, I knew I was just self-medicating. That's all I knew how to do. And I took it from there, and that's what I did, and I sought that out in any way, shape, or form. It could be alcohol in all its forms. It says that in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So anything that took me out of self, anything that altered my state of being. So that could be, well, this is Alcoholics Anonymous, so I'm going to leave it at alcohol because that's what it is, And I sought that feeling of forever, and it got me into a lot of trouble. And I learned in Alcoholics Anonymous that I was a geographic, right? I never knew that word existed. I was a geographic, and if you don't know what that is, it's somebody who moves a lot. And I did that a lot. As soon as I was 17, Mom and Dad shipped me off to this little 2-year college because they figured, out of sight, out of mind, she'll grow out of this, I kicked off the cheerleading squad. Do you know all that stuff that happens, that normal stuff that happens to alcoholic women like myself, waking up behind the dumpsters. They can't find me. Yeah, it's just crazy. And it's okay, it's okay today. It's all right today. But so, and I got my first geographic when I was 17 and a half, and I went to this little 2-year college in Boston and right in Back Bay, and it was a great location for a gal like me. And I lived in a boarding house, and another part of my story, I'm a horrible student. I have no idea how I graduated high school. No idea. I think it's because my dad was in the school system for 35 years. I think he paid somebody. I have no idea, but I graduated. And then, this little 2-year college, it was the same thing. I'm a horrible student. I graduated, but it took me an extra summer. And it was just the party is on. It is on. And I had no clue, but I was really empty, but I had no clue there was another way to live, I always felt like I was standing on the outside looking in, and it was just it was so sad, really. Really, nothing about it. There was no connectivity. There was nothing to do with connection. And as a geographic, it really starts to get disconnected as life goes on, because I didn't get sober till I was 34. So, I was out there for a while, and I moved a lot. So after school, I think I moved 9 times in 2 years. I was on the North Shore, I was on the South Shore, I was back in town, I lived with my aunt for a while. It was just, but they were really short periods of time. And then also, my jobs started to look like that. I couldn't hold a job. But I never got fired, but I always left before they fired me. I was at the jobs for say probably 60 days, 90 days. I don't think I stayed in anywhere more than 90 days. I was an expert at interviewing. I could just, and when you're young, and I was a secretary, okay, they didn't even look at my resume, it was silly. I could get jobs, and then I'd get another job, and then I'd get another job, and anyways, I wish it was like that today, but it's not as easy to get jobs today. So, so that was my story. And all along, drinking and doing drugs and other stuff, right? So, anyways, let's see. I go from there to California. I get married. But wait a minute. I had one rehab experience in there. Okay, so at 20, before I hit California, at 20, I go to rehab because I have a cocaine problem. That was my problem. Obviously, that was my problem. And I go into rehab. My mom gets me in this rehab, and that was my only experience, with a Happy Hills facility where I got a big book, and, they told me, you are an alcoholic. And I said, no way. I'm not an alcoholic. I just have a problem over here, and if I solve that, then I'll be fine. And I go through that rehab, and I, get out, and I go to a couple AA meetings for a little while, and I'm back at it. I'm drinking, and within probably a short period of time, I'm back doing my other stuff too. And I don't know, I just kind of slipped under the radar. I don't know how that happened. I just kind of went to rehab, came out, and kept drinking, and, nobody paid attention to me. And I moved out to California and continued my deal there. And that was 5 years of just whatever. And then at 25, I met a guy, and he threw a really nice birthday party for me. And, I dated him for a little while. And then, we went out, and he got this big limo, and we went out for, dinner and, all that kind of stuff. And he gave away the last line. And that is not a really good idea with this girl. Again, I'm sorry to talk about drugs, but that happened to be what happened, and I really lost it. By this time I was really advanced in my disease, and I was really bad. And And he didn't realize what he really did. And, I got really mad, and I beat him up in a parking lot. I mean, beat the hell out of him, okay? Where people had to drag me off him, and his clothes were ripped, and it was bad. So the next day, I was living with him, and the next day he's telling me that I need to leave, and he said, you can live downstairs for a little while until you get yourself together, and he said, I'd like you to make a few amends, and I'd like you to go to an AA meeting. And I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And I did that, and that's when I peeked my head into Alcoholics Anonymous one more time, right? So this is my second time. But these are really just drive-bys, people. These have nothing to do with me sitting in Alcoholics Anonymous, getting a sponsor, doing, these are just little, I'm peeking in there. And, and that was in California, in Hermosa Beach, and I hear they have a really nice clubhouse out there. I wish that I could get back out there. Like, I haven't gotten back out there since I've been sober. But I'd love to go see the clubhouse that I went and visited one time. And I sat in the back of the room, and of course I shared. Like, I had a whole lot to share, right? But of course I shared, and I told my story that I beat the hell out of my boyfriend last night, and, I'm so ashamed, and I'm so, and they were like, keep coming back, and that was it. That was my one little sneak peek again at 25, and then, that afternoon I took a walk on the, down there on the beach, and I looked up in the air and I said a prayer for the very first time, and I asked God to help me. Like, I didn't believe in anything, but I was raised Catholic, so I kind of knew something about that, right? So I just said a prayer and asked him to help me to stop doing drugs. And I did. I stopped doing drugs. That happened. I didn't stop drinking, but I stopped doing drugs. And for a long time, so that man married me. He didn't kick me out of his house. He married me. I guess I got better a little bit after I stopped doing drugs. And he married me. All his friends told him, do not do it. Do not marry this woman. Don't marry her. But he did. He married me. And we ended up having a child. We moved to Colorado and for a better quality of life. And, oh, God, I was just a mess by this time. Trust me. Now I'm really starting to see the effects of the booze because I'm not doing drugs. See, that drugs thing, it can really kind of make it can get kind of confusing, And so now I'm just doing the booze, and I'm getting nuts. And but we had a baby, so that was kind of a great byproduct of this relationship. And he's a great guy, really. He's a great guy. He just got himself wrapped up with a crazy gal. It was just, broke my heart. Well, broke his heart, because I ended up leaving him. Aaron was only like 2 years old, and I ended up leaving him because he was the alcoholic. And of course, I'm not. Well, he's not telling me. Nobody ever told. Do you know? Nobody ever told me that except that rehab told me I was an alcoholic. But either they were telling me and I wasn't hearing them, but I didn't hear it. And so I left him because he was the problem, and I was for sure that I was going to be all right if I left him, and that was the beginning. And Aaron was 2 at the time, and I moved from, we were in Evergreen, and I moved from Evergreen, Colorado to Winter Park, Colorado. And that was the beginning of the slide that went right downhill, and I picked up the drugs again in a pretty short period of time after I was up there. And, starting to do all those things that I said I would never do. It was just getting to that place, advanced. It's just the progression of the disease. It just gets worse and worse. And so anyways, Aaron was 4 years old. I was out there for another couple of years, and now I'm going to get sober. I actually stayed drunk longer than I thought. But anyways, so I was definitely doing things that I didn't want to be doing. I was leaving Aaron with, neighbors that I didn't even know, and I wouldn't come back for like 2-3 days. And I mean, it was just like I was so like, I had no boundaries on anything, where I used to be able to say, well, I won't drink until now, or I'll just do this, or I won't do that, or now there was my disease was in my face every day. I just could not get away from it. It was just one of those nights. I mean, it wasn't even my worst night. It was just one of those nights. I brought Erin down to the airport. She was going to visit her father's family. And so I had a long weekend to myself. And I came back up from the airport, and I stopped at a couple of bars on the way, and then got into Winter Park and stopped at my local bar and hooked up with the guy, and just stayed up till about 3 a.m. and it was just like not even a really, I don't know, it just didn't seem like one of those really bad nights. But for some reason, oh my God, I was leaving, because the house where my stuff is and my home was like, there was a field in between with high grass, and so I'm leaving that house at about 3 o'clock in the morning, I remember, and I'm walking back through these big weeds, and it was like getting real weird, and I was like, oh my God, my life was just, something was, it was just, and I get back to my house, and I'm sitting in my house, and I had a car full of booze, because I was going the next day. We were going to have a party up at the lake, and I was just like, I had a car full of booze, and it was like I sat there, and it was just, I'm sitting in the middle of my bed, and I'm just like getting to watch this movie. Like that I was like, what the hell? And it was like that my life was being played out in front of me. And I got to like see that it was not getting any better. I mean, it was just getting worse, I had already had a little tip from the fire, like this firefighter guy that was a friend of mine, that they were like staking out my house. Because I had like some shady people hanging there a lot, and and that I was going to lose my daughter. Now I don't know if he was just saying that to scare me straight, but shoot, man, that was just enough to tell me, to push me over the edge. So now I'm like in my house with all the blinds closed, thinking I am being stalked, and they are looking at me and watching me, and it was just and I met this guy about 1.5 years before that actually I was, that worked in the office building where I was working, and he was doing the phone system. And he had a son the same age as Erin. And I said to him one night, I said, do you want to go swimming? And he's like, yeah, let's go swimming. So I meet him up at the swimming pool. Of course, I have my little cooler, because I don't go anywhere with the little cooler and the beer in it. And I had my weed, and I get up to the pool, and I sit down, and I said, you want a beer? And he's like, nope, don't drink, and I'm like, oh. And I'm like, well, you want some of this? He's like, nope, don't. And I'm like, oh my God, what the hell is this all about? And you know what the guy did? We sat in the hot tub as I was drinking and doing my thing, and he told me his story. Oh my God. I was like, oh my God. He's been in Alcoholics Anonymous for 13 years, and this is my story, and blah, blah, blah. And he went on, and I felt so sorry for him. Oh my God. I was like, you poor thing. That's a horrible story. He's like, I know, it was really bad. He's like, didn't you say you were in rehab? And I'm like, oh yeah, that was a long time ago. I don't do that anymore, and so that he planted the seed again, like without me even knowing it. There it was. He planted the damn seed. That was like, because that can really wreck your drinking. And so, that whole 1.5 years till the moment that I just told you about, I bumped into Michael all over town. And Winter Park's just a very small town. And I'd bump into him. He'd be like, hey, how you doing? And I'd just be running from him. I wanted nothing to do with him, just like he just had nothing I wanted. But that night when I was sitting in the middle of my bed and I was shaking and I realized it is over. The party is over, man. I cannot do this. I thought of him, and I called him, and I asked him for help. And he said, do you want to go to a meeting? I mean, God, can't do it. You guys have anything better than that, do you want to go to a meeting? And I was like, oh my God. Yes, like, yes, I want to go to a meeting. And he's like, great, listen, it's 4:00 in the morning, and, I have a life now that I'm 13 years sober, and, I'll pick you up after work tomorrow, and we'll go to a meeting. And I was like, all right. So, I'd just like to tell you that that day was different than any other day. Like, it was just different because I asked for help. And, I didn't drink anymore. And I just kind of like pulled the blinds down and I sat in my house, and it was a tiny the thing was like 640 square feet. The thing was like a little tiny shoebox, but, and it was just like, I just shut everything down and I just sat there and I just rocked, and, the phone kept ringing. I remember my dealer called me and I was telling him, I'm going to a meeting. I don't know what the hell was going on with me, but I'm like, I'm going to a meeting. I'm so done. And like, he's like, you're what? You're going to a meeting? Now that's really just a little drastic. You just don't have to do that. He's like, maybe just if you, really, you don't have to do that. And this other girl called me because we were going to go to a party with all this booze. And I'm like, nope, I'm not going. I'm going to a meeting. And she's like, you're not going to a meeting in Winter Park, are you? God forbid anybody sees you here, and I'm like, I don't know where I'm going to a meeting, but I'm going to a meeting, and I'm telling everybody who called, I'm going to a meeting, oh my God, I don't know. I think, looking back, that was probably my spiritual awakening, because let me tell you something, I had never been like that before. I mean, that was a first. And so anyways, that's where it all began, in Winter Park, Colorado. And, within 45 days, I moved to Las Vegas, and I went to meetings every day. And my daughter's dad lived in Vegas, and I needed help. I mean, it was pretty evident I needed help. And when I called him and said, I'm coming to Vegas, I'm getting sober, he was like, do you know where you're coming to get sober? I was like, yeah, I really do. I called AA Central Office, and they have lots of meetings. And they have a huge fellowship, and that's what I need. And I need your help because I need you to take care of Aaron. And he's like, great. I mean, he was real supportive. So I get out to Vegas, and that's where my journey began. And I got there in November on Thanksgiving weekend, and they have a convention every Thanksgiving weekend. So I made a promise to myself. Well, I didn't know that before I got there, but I made a promise to myself that, I'd go to a meeting as soon as I got to Vegas. And I called AA Central Office and I said, hey, I just got to town, just moved here, and I got to go to a meeting. And they were like, great, we have a convention going on. And I'm like, really? What's that? And they're like, well, you just go over to the Riviera Hotel, and that's where, they'll all be. And I'm like, wow, okay. So I went over to the Riviera Hotel, and I was overwhelmed, I have to tell you. I mean, I just came from Winter Park, Colorado, but I went to meetings in Denver, so I had the experience where they're pretty big. But I had my moment of clarity, and I hung on to it. And I want to tell you that if you're sitting in this room and you really want to stop drinking, this is the place to be. I mean, it really works. I am not like any, like AA. I mean, I don't do things perfectly. But I do what's suggested, right? I mean, I've always done what's suggested. My first sponsor was appointed to me because it was like over 60 days and I was cornering too many men and telling them all my problems. And, thank goodness I cornered the right men, because one of them took my hand one night and he just, brought me into this meeting, and I thought it was kind of a date, so I thought that was kind of cool. But it wasn't. He just sat me down next to my sponsor that he said, this is your sponsor. And Jan had 13 years sober. And the only thing Jan and I had in common was we smoked. And that was back when you could smoke in meetings, right? And so we would just sit there and smoke, right? And she took me through the steps, and she was my sponsor for a while. And then that's where it just took off. And I really want to tell you that I got really fired up in Alcoholics Anonymous because I looked at people. I watched people. I looked in their eyes, and I saw the ones that were really happy. And there was this group in Las Vegas called the Floating Big Book on Friday nights, and now I think they've grown to be like the Pacific group, or not to be confused with the Pacific group, but they've grown really, really big. But back then they were the Floating Big Book, and they wore T-shirts that said the Floating Big Book, and they'd go into like hospitals and institutions, and they were smiling and they were laughing, and the reason it was the Floating Big Book was because it floated around from house to house every Friday night, and I just thought they were the coolest. I mean, they were just the coolest people, and they started taking me into Skid Row Detox up in North Vegas on Tuesdays and Thursdays at lunch, and like that was just a trip, and I just got hooked into Alcoholics Anonymous. And then I moved to Salt Lake 10 years ago. I mean, I was in Vegas for 3 years, and I didn't want to move to Salt Lake, but I had to because Aaron's dad moved here for a job, and I thought I could do it on my own again. And Aaron's getting older, but still it was really hard, and I had a full-time career, and I was working now. You know what we do when we get sober. You got to get responsible. I didn't want to get responsible, but I didn't want to drink, so I got the full-time career, and I'm dropping Aaron off in the morning at 6:30 at daycare, picking her up at 6:30 at night, and I was just like overwhelmed. I couldn't get my meetings. And when this girl doesn't get meetings, I got nuts. And I quit my job. I mean, that's not a really good thing to do. I don't suggest that you do that. But I quit my job, and I, again, called Aaron's dad and said, I need your help. And he's got a way more flexible job than I do. For whatever reason, he always has. Mine's always, but anyway, so I moved to Salt Lake. That's where he was, and he was only here for 3 months. He was like, he's like, you divorced me how many years ago? Am I ever going to get, I mean, it was like, but we never got back together. But I just followed him all over the country. I mean, it was like the craziest, but I needed his help. I couldn't do it alone. I needed him to watch Aaron. And I moved to Salt Lake 10 years ago. And then, just to, kind of speed it up a little bit. So I moved to Salt Lake, and of course you guys didn't do it right. Oh my God, I was so sad. I moved to Salt Lake. I'm like, oh my God, what am I going to do? Because where you get sober, it just seems like they never do it the same anywhere else. If you guys went anywhere, you'd think they didn't do it right, but we all kind of do it the same. But there's just, it's a funny, quirky thing. I still got the perception thing, right? But anyways, I never stopped going to meetings, so I just went to meetings. It's where I breathe. I mean, it's where I breathe. And so I'm going to meetings. I get hooked into a group, great group, and I do my thing here. And I start at 3.5 years sober. I got my first sponsee. Oh my God, that was so cool. She was 20 years old. She wasn't even of legal drinking age, and there she was in Alcoholics Anonymous. And she asked me to be her sponsor, so that was cool. And I've never not had a sponsor, by the way. Ever since I was appointed that first one. I've had a few. I mean, it happens. You just kind of, my territory moved, and I was going to meetings over here a lot, so, I hooked, but anyway, so, and every time I got a new sponsor, I worked the steps again, right? So this gal comes and asks me to sponsor, and that's like a really neat thing. I mean, if you don't have a sponsor and you haven't worked the steps, get a sponsor, work the steps, and then work with others. Because really, that's the secret here. There's not much else. That's the secret, right? We get a sponsor, we work the steps, and then we work with others. And along the way, Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to pray, right? So I got to find a spiritual path. Like I said earlier, it's a spiritual illness that can only be cured by a spiritual solution. And this is where I find my spiritual solution, right? And so, anyways, it's a great journey. Definitely not one to miss. Get in the center, get in the middle, and do the deal. Just to let you know a few things that have gone on in my life recently. That husband that I left, that I said was the alcoholic, he's fine. He's fine. He has a great life, lives in Santa Cruz, California, has a great job, has many, many friends. He's a good guy, And then the daughter that I got sober when she was 4 is now 17 and a half. And this year it was confirmed that she's one of us. And she got a DUI over spring break last year. And like hell, I'm like, oh my God, you drink? I didn't even know she drank. Oh my God, like where was I? I don't know. This nice lady said I had my mommy glasses on. I didn't want to see it. I don't know. Anyways, she spent a lot of time over her friends' houses on the weekend. So if I didn't see it, and she knows my, my story. She knows I go to AA all the time. I mean, gosh darn, she doesn't want to be around me if she's drinking, that's for sure. And so, but anyway, she got a DUI and it was really scary. And she actually got a lot of tickets and stuff. Like there were lots of red flags, but there's always a great story too. One thing about us is we are really great at telling stories, and I wanted to believe her every step of the way. So, but she was found 10 feet into an intersection, slumped over the wheel, passed out at 2:30 in the morning. She came to a stop at the red light, which is such a gift that I was going to the police department and not the emergency room or the morgue, really. Because she's a blackout drinker. She's a periodic drinker, but she's a blackout drinker. Every time she drinks, you guys, 17 and a half, and she's like, I don't know if it's going to be the first drink or the fourth one, but I black out. Anyways, I got, it's such a gift to be a part of Alcoholics Anonymous and know a little bit about recovery because I could spot it. I only saw her drunk once. I didn't need to see anymore. I knew. She was in a full-blown blackout at 10 o'clock at night and passed out on the floor, naked. Okay, that looks familiar. Hair draped over her face. Okay, I know that one. Yep, okay. Get her up off the floor, put her in bed. She woke up the next day like, how did I get here? And whatever I said last night, Mom, meant nothing, right? We're okay. Yeah, we're not okay. She ran away from home that day, and I took some action. We did an intervention and sent her to a wilderness program down in southern Utah. They have some great stuff out there for kids nowadays. I want to tell you, for young adults. I don't want to say kids. Young adults, amazing. See, she's 17 and a half, and I knew I didn't have that much time, right? I mean, I have the power only for so long, right? So I exercised my power. And it worked. I swear to you, it worked. And within 1 week, they broke her denial, folks. And she's writing me letters. I am so sorry. Oh, my God, what happened to my life? What happened to me? I took the drink took me. My life was one big lie. How did I lie so much? Why did I, come on, we have to lie. We're forced into lying. If you live a life like I did, you gotta lie. Any idiot wouldn't be truthful, come on. So anyways, 1 week into the thing, her denial's broken, and she's just like, wow, and before she left for the wilderness, she was like in my face that night when I got her in a full-blown blackout. And she's in my face saying, I don't want to be like you, you freak. And then I'm getting letters from the wilderness, I want what you have. Like, I want to love AA like you love AA. How does that happen? I don't know. And so She spent 9 weeks out in the wilderness, and then at week 6, she checked herself into a year-long program out in Bend, Oregon, where she's now learning how to live independently, sober. And she's finishing her senior year there, and they're very 12-step based, so they're AA. And I feel very fortunate that I have the means to do this, although you know what, it's not about, we just have jobs. My husband, her dad, and me, we have jobs and we have credit cards. Hello. I mean, they used to do great loans on this stuff, but if you know what's going on out there in the world right now, so they don't. But, hey, we have the means to pay off the credit card, so, whatever, right? Whatever you got to do. And I'm very grateful that I got 2 guys in my life that are very, supportive. Yeah, I got remarried. That's another part of the story. So that was pretty cool. I've been married 7 years. That's amazing for this girl. I met him when I was 5 years sober. First 3 years were hell. Hell. Like they talk about the honeymoon stage. I don't know. Not with this alcoholic, Well, we're both in Alcoholics Anonymous. He's celebrating 21 years in February. So that was kind of fun. Boy meets girl on campus, right? So. But, we're just doing the best we can. And you know what, you guys, thanks so much for listening to me and, being here to support me. And, I just really have enjoyed telling you my story. So thanks for listening to me share.
I hadn't thought of it for a long time. That detox in North Las Vegas, I think it was 2 nights. I don't even know. It's the most god-awful thing I've ever been through in my life. Let's give Lauri another hand. We'd like to ask everyone to clean up after themselves, and please stick around so we can get to know you better. If you'd like to make this your home group, please see our secretary, Lauri, after the meeting. If you do not have a job in AA, see Jennifer. I don't know if she's here. Christy will fill in for her.